Welcome to the Tech We'll bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. Today, we are joined by Joshua Bernstein, a former VC McKinsey consultant and founder of the Wharton MBA, who combines business and brainwaves, sharing how anybody can leverage neuroscience to enhance the way they live, love, work, and play. He is the creator of the Sync protocol, the world's first thought-based protocol that people use to create instant trust and connection. Used across 100,000 plus interactions on 6 continents, the Sync protocol allows the spiritually curious to see their intent manifest in real time. Joshua has lived or worked in the United States, Europe, Asia, Central America, and South America, bringing a global perspective to unlock the human potential. So, Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ezekiel. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you as well. So, let's dive in. So, you talk about influencing someone's emotional state without words. So can you walk us through a real example where this has worked in a high stake setting like a boardroom or negotiation?
Absolutely. And before doing that, let me just take a little step back to set some context and the stage for why that's important. So, as you and I are interacting, or you're interacting with anyone, our brains and our bodies are naturally trying to connect up with one another. So if you were to measure that, for example, in our brainwave activity, you would be able to see our brains in real time, essentially trying to dance with one another, to trying to sync up. And we have all had this experience where you meet someone and you just instantly click with them. We often say, right, we're on the same wavelength, or this person just kind of gets who I am. And when we say those things, we're trying to give words to that amazing feeling of instant trust and connection. So in the world of neuroscience, we call that synchrony or interpersonal synchrony. And the reason why that's so important, and this ability to be able to create real-time trust and connection or share emotional states is so important, is because all of the decisions that we make in our life are driven by emotion, right? You and I, we tend to think that we're logical people, right? Especially people with this STEM background in this engineering incest, right? We pride ourselves on being very logical. But in reality, all of the decisions that we make in life are made first emotionally, and they're done very quickly. And then we use our logic to try to explain to ourselves, to our partners, to the other people in our life why we made that decision. So to go back to this example of being in a very high stakes environment, every interaction that we have has this dynamic going on that we can't see on the surface. So I would be lying to you if I were saying that there were one high stakes interaction in which this has happened, in which it helped. It actually is in every interaction, whether very high stakes or what we would consider just a daily occurrence. This is always at play. So I've now been working for 28 years on one very important question, and that is, how can we make this a conscious process so you and I and everyone listening can choose to create that connection versus where it is today for most people, which is a random occurrence?
Wonderful, wonderful. So, your intro and profile talks about the sync protocol. Could you walk us through what the sync protocol is all about?
Absolutely. So the sync protocol is an acronym, so SYNC, and it's a system that I use to train people to create this connection on demand. So those four steps, S stands for shift your state. So getting yourself into the right state to be able to create this connection. Y is to yield your identity, meaning remove any kind of agenda or outcome that you might have and get fully present in the moment. N is to navigate the nervous system. So that is to learn to actually create the connection with the other person by noticing what they're doing, noticing what's going on with you. And then C is to create with coherence, meaning once you have created that emotional connection with the other person, how to use your thoughts, your mind, your body, your behavior to then guide the conversation and interaction in the direction that you want to move it. And so that sync protocol is the learning of those four steps so that anybody can learn to create and enjoy all of the benefits that come with having this skill set. Now, this is in contrast to where kind of sync is today, and that is it has been considered a random process. And there's a tremendous amount of research, Ezekiel, that comes into this. If you're familiar with, for example, PubMed, which is the database of the National Institutes of Health that classifies and categorizes research work, there are over 16,000 citations related to synchrony right now. So it's a very well studied phenomenon. We know the benefits of it. We know the patterns in the brain and in the body that result from it. But what's been missing for the longest time is a way to make it into a skill set. So that's where my work has focused on over these last 20 years, is to distill all of those principles down into something that's very structured and learnable so that any person can kind of logically walk through these four steps and learn how to get the benefits from that.
That is interesting. So, this sync protocol sounds almost like a superpower. So, how did you first discover this idea, and what was your lab accident moment where you realized that it actually worked?
That's, by the way, that's a great question, Ezekiel. And it really comes down, I would say, at the core level to what we can see and what we can't see. And what I mean by that is it's easy to believe that we observe with our eyes, what we touch with our hands is real, right? We consider that to be something real if we have that sensory experience of it. But at the same time, right now, we're probably using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and electricity, right? Which are all things that we can't see, but we know they're true because we get to take advantage and use them, right, in our daily lives. And so, in terms of the moments that were important in starting to kind of figure this out, or those aha moments, the big one was for me trying to figure out how can we know that what we don't see as it relates to how we think, how we use our intention, how can we actually know that's real, right? And
Yeah.
and that's a thing that everyone has to kind of have their own experience of it. For me, it was a very strange situation that opened my eyes, and that was I had broken my collarbone back in the late 1990s. I was playing football and I broke my collarbone. And it just so happened that I had a vacation booked that next week to the Bahamas, and I didn't want to cancel vacation. So I had my brace on and I went down on vacation. And when I was in the lobby of the hotel, a gentleman caught my eye and he walked across the entire room, came right up to me and he said, "Sir, I don't mean to scare you, but there's energy shooting out of your shoulder." And he pointed right to the exact place where I had the break. in the collarbone. And it took me back, and I asked, what do you mean there's energy shooting out of my shoulder? And he said, listen, I work with energy. I've studied something called Qigong, and I can see there's some problem there. And if you will let me just move my hand near the area, I think it might help you. So long story short, he did that for about 2 minutes. The feeling in that area of the body was tremendously better after those 2 minutes. I went back home to where I was living, got another x-ray. The bone had healed very quickly. And that to me was the beginning of an exploration in this world of the unseen, right? He had now opened up my mind to the idea that what is invisible to me might actually be something that certain people know how to interact with. Make sense?
Yeah, it
So,
does.
so that for me was the moment at which my mind was really open to say, there's probably a lot more here to explore and to learn about. And that's what led me down this very dedicated path of learning more about how our brains work, how our bodies work. And Ezekiel, in a recent podcast, you brought up something very interesting in talking about creativity. You brought up this concept of biomimicry, right?
Yeah, I remember that episode with Patrick Williams. Yeah.
It was fascinating, right? And you all started talking about biomimicry and about how so much of the technology that we use day to day is modeled on our natural world. Well, I would pose to everyone here a little twist on that concept, and that is almost all of the communication technology that we use today, that we're using right now to communicate with one another, is an example of biomimicry. But the biomimicry that's being imitated is us. It's an attempt to take our human capabilities and to turn those external so that we can use them in the real world. And so all of our internet technologies, our Wi-Fi technologies, our Bluetooth technologies, they're modeled on capabilities that you and I and everyone listening here has inside of us. We were born with them. And so what I'm really doing with this work on sync is teaching people how to first activate these technologies that are already inside us and how to use them without the need for all of the external communication technologies that we're using day to day. What we find is through synchrony, we have a much more powerful technology for human connection.
Wow, that is such an amazing concept. So you talked about how, I mean, humans have these I mean features that technology currently imitates, like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and you talked about how your work focuses on how we can unlock these innate features on ourselves as humans. So could you elaborate? I mean, I really, by myself, do not currently get how, as a human, I have a feature that is similar to a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So I like to understand that better.
Absolutely. And you are so much more powerful than you've been taught. So if we think about how we connect to the internet, right? You
Hmm.
have some kind of device that has the ability to go through, let's say, an internet service provider or to pick up on a Wi-Fi signal, right? And that device creates the connection. And when you have that connection, what can you then do? You can send voice, video, and data to other people, right? As long as they have the connection. That's kind of the basics, let's say, of how we use the internet through our phones, through our computers and other devices. Well, what happens when you have a weak internet connection? How does that feel for you?
Well, that's really awful. It sucks a lot. I mean,
Right?
if I had a weak internet connection right now, this interview would be lagging. I would not be able to even hear you clearly. At certain points, the video might even go off and I'll only be able to hear your audio. So that really sucks.
It's super frustrating, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And and what I have learned now is in the same way that you connect to the internet and send things and receive back in other people, our brains and body do that with each other. So literally, and I'm not saying this is a visualization of how it works, our brains and bodies literally connect up with one another. And this doesn't matter geography, physical distance, it doesn't matter. So right now, you and I have the equivalent of an internet connection between us right now.
Wow.
And our brains and our bodies are sending information back and forth and also tapping into similar sources of information at the same time. And what I mean by that is if you and I are both accessing Riverside, right, to record this program, I'm not sending anything to you. You're not necessarily sending anything to me. We're both tapping into the Riverside FM web service, right? And so humans have this ability to connect with one another that's born inside of us. And when we don't have a strong connection with one another, it's as frustrating as having that laggy internet connection. And the reality is most people are going through their daily life interacting with people with a laggy human connection. And that creates a tremendous number of problems between people. One, we get frustrated, right? Number two, what we think we're communicating doesn't always reach the other person because of the lags and the breaks and the disconnects. And so we end up having these real challenges just with interpersonal relationships and all human interactions for these things that we can't observe, but we know when the connection's not there and when it is, right? When you've met that person and you just really hit it off and you say, I want to do business with this person or I want to build a company with this person, right?
Yeah.
Your body feels inside of it the strength of that signal. But since we were never taught how to pay attention to that, and we don't have an external thing we can look at that says you have 5 bars, right, of connection between each other right now. What I've been working to do is essentially to codify that, is to give people the skills so that they can know when the connection is happening and they can learn to tap into themselves to feel the strength of the connection and to learn to adjust that on demand. And there are a couple of ways, Ezekiel, to think about this type of connection and how it's established. So we can establish that connection, you and I, with everyone in the audience, using our brain. And that's largely a function of things like our brain wave activity and things called mirror neurons and other systems that we have in the body. We also have a way to connect with one another through body movements and body language, right? And those are things that people might have heard referred to as mirroring or matching or rapport, which typically tends to refer to people starting to move in unison, when they're establishing a connection. But there's a third lens, which is very interesting, which is the use of language to create synchrony. And I'll explain very briefly what that is because I think your audience is going to find this fascinating. And these are things they can use like starting today to start to improve the way they relate with people. But I've developed something that I call the SHFT code. It stands for see, hear, feel, think. And what that means is every person has a preference for how they receive information typically in spoken word, and how they communicate information back to other people. So some people prefer to use things related to what they see. And those kind of people might use words that say, I see what you mean. It's crystal clear to me. It's a sunny day, right? Some people prefer what they hear. They might say, oh, that's clicking for me, or that doesn't sound right, right? Other
Yes.
people prefer what they feel, like, oh, I grasp that. It makes me feel warm inside. And then some people prefer what they think. They might say it makes sense. Oh, yeah, that's logical, right? And my guess is a lot of people in your audience may prefer what they think. Because when we get into the fields of STEM and engineering, right, we have learned to pride ourselves in logic. And most of the teaching that we do is based in logical principles. So it tends to attract a lot of people that prefer that thinking process. Well, what's interesting, Ezekiel, about the shift code is two things. One, if you learn to identify your preference, you start to know yourself better, and it impacts many things, not only how you talk, but it can impact the process in which you do certain tasks, the way you dress, the way there's all kinds of things that are captured inside of these preferences. So first thing is to learn your own preference. The second is to start to pay attention to the preferences of the people that you interact with. And once you know that and you start to communicate with them in their preferred preference, it's like you're speaking a much clearer language to them. It gets rid of the static, the frustration, and things like that. And so by looking at synchrony across these three levels, across the brain, the body, and the language that we use, people can develop a skill set that's going to help them tremendously to have these stronger communications. And going back to this idea of biomimicry, right? Let's assume now that we really are the most powerful technology that's ever been invented, us as people, right? What
Okay.
I'm doing is just starting, right? I'm just
Sounds
starting to
interesting.
teach people to use their own technology in a new way.
Wow. Wow. That is such an interesting concept. I mean, a shift code. Wow. Like the way you broke it down, it's really, 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 really graspable and valuable as well. I myself would definitely, I mean, consider applying these codes henceforth. And I guess I actually think like the audience as well will find this very valuable. So thanks for that. Yeah. So moving on,
Absolutely.
you mentioned that inner work often doesn't translate to outer results. I mean, from your profile on Podmatch. So tell us, what do you think? Why do you think so many tech founders or engineers or scientists struggle with this gap?
Sure. So let's first talk about when I say inner work, kind of what we mean so that we're all on the same page. At some point in life, I believe almost all people start to ask kind of, is there more to life? Is there more to who I am or my potential? And people start to find things that they hope will get them back towards what they would consider, let's say, their authentic self, or maybe to remove challenges that they've been having in their life, right? And some people turn to meditation. Some people might turn to yoga, martial arts. Some people might turn towards therapy or find other mentors or coaches to help them through this. But when I say the inner work, it's really about starting to become more fully human and to get back to what we perceive as our kind of true authentic selves, right? And with this inner work, a few things tends to happen as people dive deeper and deeper into the inner work. they tend to have some very important kind of emotional and psychological breakthroughs. They understand themselves better. Maybe they start to feel better throughout certain parts of the day. But what also happens, and this happens a tremendous amount to people and tech founders and people who've prided themselves on, say, building external success, is they realize that the success that they have built until now wasn't really done by them. It was done by a persona or a mask that they used and built over many years to try to fit in or to try to do what you're supposed to do, right? In order to be successful. And the vast majority of adults that I've spoken with live from this persona or this mask. And what's so challenging is that once you've built up your life on this persona or this mask, it can be terrifying to then try to act from your authentic self that you're discovering in the inner work. Because all of these fears come up. Like, if I really behave as who I really am I going to lose everything that I've built? Right? And this is a fear that literally keeps people up at night because they know in their heart of hearts that this authentic self is who they are and who they want to kind of bring through the world, but they're very afraid of judgment, of losing things they've built, of the way people will react if they really speak their truth. So the way that we address this and help founders and other people around this is, again, it's through synchrony, because when you uncover who you really are in the inner work, you tend to spend part of your day in that space. Often people have what they call a morning routine where they'll do their meditation or they'll do their, and during that time period, they feel incredible, right? It's because they're actually like stripped away all of the excess stuff, all of the BS, right? And they're back to who they know they really are. And so the question is, how do you then bring that back out into your day-to-day life in a way that works? And the way they can do that is through this process of synchrony, because if they do their morning work and they're in that place where they're really feeling their authentic self, when you go into your next meeting or any interaction you have from there on, you don't have to perform anymore. All you have to do is create the human connection using synchrony, right, which is already built into you, and let that synchrony drive the interactions, meaning you're no longer having to persuade or kind of force someone to go along with something. What you can literally do is create a connection with that person and then shift your emotional state into the state that includes what you want to do with that person. So let's say it's in the context of business. It's an important client, right? We know that that deal is not going to happen until that client trusts you, at the very least, right? There are no business deals that are beneficial to both sides that are done without trust. So this founder they've done the inner work and now they're coming out and they've learned how to create synchrony. When they get together with that client and they link up their brains and bodies, all the founder has to do is now start to shift into feeling, I trust this person. I trust this client. I want to do business together. And the other person has no choice but to feel the same thing. That's just kind of how our brains and bodies work. So what it does is it allows the person to now authentically show up in the world as their true self. They don't need to try the influence hack or the sales tactic, because all decisions are based on emotional state. They can simply share the emotional state with the other person, and that includes the decision that they would like them to make. Now, this doesn't mean that they just shift their state and they shut up and don't say anything, right? You still You've got to talk with people, right? You do business. There are things that have to get agreed upon. But when you now start to layer in the shift code, the language component there, and you create even more connection with that person, it creates a natural path that makes the process of doing business together simpler and more authentic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. That's a really wonderful explanation. So, I'd like to ask, Joshua, for our listeners who are more logic-driven, examples, say engineers, coders, or data scientists, how would you convince them that thought-based influence isn't just another woo?
It's a great question. And let me ask you, Ezekiel, can I lead you through a quick exercise for about 2 minutes so I can give you and all of your audience a taste, a small taste of how this is?
All right, that sounds exciting.
Okay, so what I'm going to do in a moment, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and just make sure, are your hands free? Okay, great. So, and if you're watching this here, you can go ahead and follow along as well. Just make sure that you're in a place that it's safe to close eyes and you're not operating any heavy machinery or anything like that. But Ezekiel, so go ahead and close your eyes.
All right, eyes
Now
closed.
great. Now take a deep breath in and just let it out and relax. Great. Now, remember a time that you were feeling extremely confident.
Mm-hmm.
See what you were seeing, hear
Yeah.
what you were hearing, and
Mm.
feel how amazing you were feeling. Now, you'll notice somewhere in your visual field, there's an image of that experience. So reach out with your physical hand and touch that image, wherever it might be. Okay, you got your finger touching it? Perfect. Now, with your other hand, go to the image and pinch that image between your two hands. So, like you're holding a photograph.
Mm-hmm. Pinch it between my two hands.
Yeah, so like you're holding a photograph between your two hands. Got it?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Now go ahead and spread your hands apart wider and wider. Spread your hands as wide as a movie screen
Oh, wow.
and notice
Yeah.
how it makes you feel.
Oh, wow. This is great. This is exciting.
And when you're ready, now bring the hands back to their original size and place.
Okay.
And you can let go of that photograph. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and open your eyes.
Wow.
If you want to
This,
tell people watching at home, tell me what you experienced.
well, for a moment, I felt like I was in that moment where uh I imagined where I was extremely confident. Then after a while, I started seeing like the exact same scenes, like the exact same scene, the people I saw at that particular moment, uh the audience, then I started hearing myself speak the exact same way I spoke at that particular moment. So it was a really clear picture. And uh, after a while, I felt exactly how confident I was feeling at that moment I imagined right here as I'm sitting.
Excellent. So, a couple of things, Ezekiel, that you just experienced, that I think your audience will find fascinating. So, number one, that was not just your imagination. What you did is you were working with your biological technology, what we call the biofield. So that image that was in front of you, that is a database. It's a storage file that has every experience you have ever had in your life. And by accessing that file, it's almost like choosing an old video, right? And by grabbing it and starting to change the size of it, you literally are re experiencing, right, that moment that you had years ago. And so you have access to everything that you have ever experienced in your life. And again, this is a technology. So when you moved your hands wider apart, was that any different than pinch to zoom on your phone, where you zoom in on a picture, right? That was the biomimicry that we're talking about. Like your pinch to zoom on your phone is the attempt to recreate our own ability to do what you just did.
Wow. Wow. I mean, this is real.
So, so to your question, right? How would I convince a logical person that this isn't woo, that it's real? One of the ways is for them just to take 2 minutes and do that simple exercise. That is usually enough for people to understand that we're dealing with something very powerful. And then how does this tie back to what we've been talking about, let's say with the sync protocol, right? The first step is shift your state. So
Hmm.
imagine someone is about to go into an important meeting at work, at home, at school, wherever it might be. They can take 2 minutes and do what we just did, and they will show up in that meeting in a completely different emotional state than they were in just before doing the exercise. And so you just learned 2 minutes of what I teach people over hours, and some clients work with me over months. And that was one tiny little aspect of what you already have in you in terms of your biological technologies. So you probably see how excited I am by these things because, you know, I've been studying these things for years, but I still feel like we're at stage one, right? In really understanding how we can leverage these. And as we're all now getting pulled deeper and deeper into the world of artificial intelligence, right? The question becomes, how do we do two things? One, how can we really develop and use these human technologies or this human intelligence that's already inside us? So there's a tremendous opportunity to dive deeper into who we are as we start to rely more and more on these, call it external AI technologies that we're all using every day. And then the question becomes, how do we combine those two things, right? So how do we start to enable AI that we're going to use every day in our lives to utilize, leverage, and help us become more fully human? So there's a tremendous number of things, that we're exploring, that we're working on, that we're building, right now, that I think are going to be fascinating both to your audience and to the kind of the broader society.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. Really, really, really great concept. I mean, that could actually help a lot for someone who maybe wants to go for a job interview or an investor pitch or even a tough conversation with your boss. I mean, with just 2 minute exercise, you could actually be uh, in a whole new different state that will boost your performance. So yeah, that's a very fascinating concept.
Yeah, we
Um,
have so much like right at our fingertips that allows us to do these kinds of things. It's already inside of us. So I mentioned earlier in our conversation that the first thing I do is activate, right, people. And the word might sound a little strange when you hear that. What do you mean by activate? But what I mean is there is technology in us that hasn't been used or used properly by us. We were never taught about this. So there really is this first phase, which happens very quickly. Like when I activate someone for synchrony, it's 60 to 90 minutes maximum. But once the technology is kind of taken out of this dormant state, and then the person can start to train it, it gives them access to a full spectrum of technologies that they never touched before. So to your thing about, yeah, you could show up for an investor pitch or a job interview, whatever the kind of the situation may be, when you show up with this kind of skill set, you get rid of this need to perform, to pretend, right? To use hacks or gimmicks, because now you can just show up as who you really are. Like when you went back to whatever that moment was and you felt really confident, that was you, like the authentic you having a really peak experience, right? That was not something about you having to pretend to be someone else, or like that was literally you getting back to kind of Ezekiel, kind of core strength and core power. And so I love to see people as we lead them through these various exercises and learnings, because when people get back in touch with who they really are, that's where your power is.
It is so exciting to hear. So I have some more questions for you,
Of
Joshua.
course.
So tell us, with the advancement of technology in terms of AI, virtual reality, etc. So do you think that these technologies could or would disrupt human connection? I mean, for better or worse. Give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge that we face. And I'll start with even before AI, something we've all experienced. So when the world locked down and people were pushed to video conferencing, right? One of the primary ways we naturally get in sync with other people is through direct eye contact. And when we're on these video platforms, we can't have that, right? You're always wondering, should I look at the person? Should I look at the camera? Right? You're trying to kind of figure out what's the right place to focus. And so just by the very nature of being pushed into this world of video conferencing, it created a tremendous disruption in human connection. It literally took away our number one way to get in sync naturally with other people. So that created a tremendous challenge for us that we're still not solving, because sync is something that the brain and body wants to do. And when it doesn't have the ability to do it, it feels tiring. So you've heard of probably Zoom fatigue, right? And those kinds of concepts. That's part of that problem, is that the brain and body are feeling worn out because they can't do what they naturally want to do. And being in sync is energizing. You know, from a physics standpoint, right? When you're in sync with someone, your brains are moving in unison, right? And you can
Yeah,
measure sync. And so when those brain waves move in unison, you essentially add them together. They stack on each other. They become more powerful when they become coherent. And people were losing that and are losing that through this video conference system. So that's one big challenge. Then the next challenge or opportunity, based on kind of how you play, and it has both, is this idea of authenticity, right? So nowadays, we're at the point where we don't really know if a video is real or not, right? Is it a deep
Mm,
fake? Actually, the person, that's speaking. And that is going to create tremendous challenges around trust, right? Around safety, around how we bond with one another. So I think what we'll probably see is an increase in the importance people place on in-person meetings, on in-person events, on getting offline. So we're going to see a tremendous resurgence of the desire for people to have physical intimacy and to get offline into communities, into groups, to meet one-on-one and those kinds of things. Now, there are tremendous benefits that the AI can also bring as it relates to connection. For example, as we talked about the shift code and learning to communicate with people in their preference. Right? One thing technology is very good at doing is to identifying and maybe giving you suggestions based on the person's preferences. So maybe we'll be in a Zoom meeting, 6 months, a year from now, and it will be giving us prompts in real time about how we should communicate with the other person. And that makes the conversation more effective. Things like that. So I think, AI is going to continue down its path at lightning speed, right? Every month we've got capabilities that we didn't even know were possible, right? And in a parallel path, the importance of human connection will grow tremendously as well. So I think one thing you'll see that will be interesting to the people listening here is many companies will start to combine their IT groups with their HR groups. So we're starting to see the trend already. We'll see companies having one person that oversee both IT and HR. And that's something that has been, very seldom seen until now. But what it's really saying to us is we need to have technology and humanity, right, in the same boat, working together. So for the people listening here, they have a tremendous opportunity to say, get ahead of this trend by really focusing on interpersonal communication skills, right? Because we all know everyone in technology is a little bit afraid that maybe the computer is going to try to take a portion of my job, or maybe it's going to be able to code better than I ever will be, right? There's a lot of fear right now. But I would encourage people more to think of AI as a companion, as a partner, as a thought partner. And so it's going to be very important for people to get as fluent as they can with working with AI, and equally fluent at how they interrelate with everyone else that they're dealing with.
okay, so Joshua, I have one more question for you. So I normally like to save this one for the last to ask every guest I interview here on the show. So tell us, what does innovation mean to you, and how does it relate to your field?
So innovation to me really focuses on looking for new ways to do things, new ways to solve problems. And as your other guests have talked about too, to me, it comes down to creativity. It's coming up with a goal or challenge that you want to solve, and both thinking through and testing the various ways that you might get to that solution. And the way that innovation relates to the work that I'm currently doing is in a very unique way. And that is, I don't believe that most people have many new things they need to add on to who they are or what they do. I believe most people have to take away or strip away things that are blocking who they really are at their fullest potential. So for me, a lot of my work now as it relates to innovation is trying to find innovative ways to help people get back to who they really are at their core. Absolutely. And I'm sure we'll put in the show notes as well, but people can feel free to reach me directly. My email is joshua@thesyncadvantage.com, which we can put in the show notes. You can find me at LinkedIn or on X. I'm at Joshua Bernstein. This was great, Ezekiel. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be with you. Your questions were phenomenal, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So I look forward to continuing this at some point as well.